Hello and welcome. I hope you enjoyed the week 1 of the Mary Kay biography, or chapter 1, depending on when you're listening. Now it is chapter 2, A Competitive Spirit. So follow along or listen, or maybe this will just remind you to pull out your copy and read it for yourself, either one. I actually like to read and listen to somebody say it at the same time. So, chapter 2, A Competitive Spirit. Competition can be a very strong motivation. I have learned that it becomes most powerful when you compete with yourself and when you learn from your failures. As I was growing up, my mother constantly told me, anything anyone else can do, you can do better. After hearing this enough times, I became convinced that I could do better, and in my mother's eyes, one way for me to prove this was by making straight A's in school. B's just weren't good enough. I didn't want to disappoint her or myself, and so I worked as hard as I could to reach the goals she had set for me. But as I worked to make the best grades in my class, I found that competition and doing my best became my goals too. During those days, I never thought in terms of beating the other children. All I really wanted to do was to better my own best achievements. Soon it became necessary for me to excel in everything I did. Yes, I wanted to sell the most tickets for the Mayfete or the most boxes of Girl Scout cookies. But more important, I wanted to sell more tickets or more cookies than I had the previous year. As I progressed through my career, the competitive spirit my mother had encouraged helped me through some very difficult days. And with each challenge, I concentrated upon competing with myself. Every Saturday, I computed my weekly sales, and I always wanted my earnings to be a little more than the week before. When I was successful, it wasn't because I was more talented than the next salesperson. It was just willing to make more sacrifices. I was willing to work hard and pay the price for that success. Of course, I didn't always reach my goal, but fortunately, my mother always taught me how to lose. She did this by encouraging me to look to the future, to do better the next time, to try harder. I think it's extremely important for young people to learn that you can't win them all, and it is simply impossible to be the best all the time. Today, when I see parents pushing children to win, as they often do in some little league teams, I just pray that someone is also teaching the youngsters how to accept defeat, because anyone who competes has to face defeat and learn how to go on from there. One of my favorite expressions is, we fail forward to success. It's true. We learn from our failures, and how many times we have all heard it said that the person who never fails never attempts anything. I've found that successful people are never afraid to try, because they are never afraid to fail. Many times I have told the people in our organization, if we ever decide to compare knees, you're going to find that I have more scars than anyone else in the room. That's because I have fallen down and gotten up so many times in life. During the early years of Mary Kay Cosmetics, we didn't set the world on fire. We didn't always set the world on fire. The company you see today was created in spite of many disappointments and setbacks. But I envisioned a company in which any woman could compete against her own best effort and thus become as successful as she wanted. From the very beginning, the doors of our company were wide open for any woman who believed that hard work and determination could conquer failures. Any woman who had the courage to dream and who was willing to pay the price. I believe you can have anything you want in this world, but yes, you have to pay a price. Throughout my childhood, I knew that in order to get something, I had to give up something else. When I was a student, that usually meant giving up an extra hour or two of sleep so I could study. When I began my sales career, it meant giving up more sleep so that I could do my housework and care for my children. As a young working mother, it also meant giving up my social life. There weren't enough hours in the day to work, keep house, look after the children, and to have left over for anything else. But I never resented those sacrifices. I wanted to support my family well, to buy a nicer house, to move to a nicer neighborhood. I knew that each of these goals had a price, and my spirit of competition is what always helped me feel that the price was worth it. Competing and striving to excel also can be a lot of fun. As a young child, I enjoyed the satisfaction of bringing home the A's my mother expected, and in junior high, I experienced more fun of competition when I discovered 3 new talents: typing, extemporaneous speaking, and debating. Typing was my first challenge. My teacher, Mrs. Davis, took me under her wing, and with her encouragement, I was determined to become the best typist I could. My greatest wish at that time was to have a typewriter of my own, but I knew it would be very expensive, and so it never occurred to me to ask for one. Then, almost as in a miracle, my mother surprised me with a Woodstock typewriter. To this day, I can't imagine how she was able to save enough money for the down payment, or how long it must have taken her to pay for that wonderful machine. But it was so like her to find a way. She always went to extraordinary lengths to encourage me to excel in whatever I did. And she realized that having my own typewriter would help me develop my typing skills. Needless to say, that old Woodstock was one of my most prized possessions, and knowing what my mother must have sacrificed to pay for it made me even more determined to become an expert typist. I cannot describe my satisfaction when at long last I brought home a trophy for being the best typist in my class. Another ambition at that young age was to be a good extemporaneous speaker. And as in typing, a wonderful teacher encouraged and coached me. Before I was out of junior high, I had competed in a statewide contest and had actually placed second. What a thrill it was for me to feel that I was the second best speaker in the entire state of Texas. In high school, I became interested in formal debate, and after making the team, I won several honors in that field. These youthful accomplishments gave me the courage to practice and improve my speaking skills. I still work hard to perfect each line of every speech I'm asked to give. And as a result, speaking before thousands of women at Mary Kay meetings still give me the same challenge and thrill I got back then in speech competitions. In fact, the thrill is even bigger. Encouragement from my mother and teachers was extremely important to me, but as I look back on my childhood, I suspect that the biggest influence on my competitive spirit was my friendship with Dorothy Zapp. When we were children, I simply enjoyed our special relationship, but now I realize that being Dorothy's friend exposed me to an exciting new world. Subconsciously, I must have recognized that I could earn a place in such world if I were only willing to work for it. Dorothy's family was much better off financially than my own, and while she lived just around the corner, her house was by far the nicest one in the neighborhood. Every day, Dorothy wore a crisp, starched pinafore to school. Remember, that was before the days of wash and wear. Every morning, her mother curled her long golden hair until she looked as if she had stepped off the cover of a magazine. And every morning, clean but plain little Mary Catherine would appear on the front porch to walk to school with picture-perfect Dorothy. I still blame those mornings at Dorothy's house for the fact that I've always been somewhat on the plump side. Dorothy was a tiny, fragile child who never wanted to eat her breakfast. Her mother would coax her to eat her toast with strawberry jam and drink her glass of milk with ice. But when her mother wasn't looking, Dorothy would pass them over to me, and who was I to see good food go to waste? After all, Dorothy's breakfast was sumptuous fare compared to the bowl of cereal I had to fix for my own morning meal. Dorothy and I shared all the joys and sorrows of growing up girls. Because I was an A student, Mrs. Zapp considered me a good friend for Dorothy and always welcomed me into their home. As for me, I thought it was a wonderful treat to be Dorothy's friend. That meant I could eat her breakfast every morning, go on family vacations with to her grandmother's farm, and join her family for luscious Christmas festivities. Some of my fondest childhood memories are of the Zapps' Christmas trees. Each tree reached the top of their very high ceiling and seemed to fill the entire room. In those days, nobody used store-bought ornaments, and so the Zapps' tree was strung with popcorn and cranberries and apples and oranges. Each year, it seemed that they had the most beautiful Christmas tree in the entire world. Although I didn't realize it at the time, my friendship with Dorothy was making me more competitive. I was aware that I was supposed to be someone she looked up to, and so, of course, this was another reason I had to keep up straight A's. Besides, when Dorothy made an A, I had to make an A- or an A+. This competition extended into other areas as well. For example, if Dorothy sold 12 Mayfet tickets, I had to sell 20. Her friendship offered me so much that all I could do was try to be worthy of her. Even so, Dorothy and I willingly shared everything, and neither of us ever felt envy for the other. About the time we graduated from Dow Junior High School, Dorothy's father received a promotion and the family moved to a larger house on the right side of town. I was so impressed that I still remember the address, 4024 Woodley Ave. After the move, there was a time when we didn't see much of one another, but as adults, we were able to reestablish our bond, and it was a wonderful friendship, and is to this day. Another lasting and influential friendship was to begin during those early years. Like Dorothy, Tilly Bass came from a family that was much more affluent than mine. Her father was chief of detectives with the Houston Police Force, and I considered him to be a very important person. Tilly and her mother knew that I had to cook and keep house for my father, and so each took me under her wing. Those two ladies certainly taught me many, many things I needed to know. Tilly was a little older than I, and because of our age difference, I felt that I really needed to strive to keep up. I guess I was afraid that if I didn't do well, she wouldn't be my friend. Thank heaven that thought never crossed her mind. Tilly rescued me again when I was a young career woman supporting my family. In those days, there was no such thing as local daycare center or nursery school. A mother who worked outside of her home had to rely on family and friends for safe and loving childcare. Tilly lived across the street from me, and when I went out to conduct sales presentations, she took care of my children. Our friendship grew over the years. I used to joke that Tilly became the wife that I needed during all of those years as I struggled up the ladder of success. It's a joke I never had to explain to a fellow career woman. By the time I reached high school, my competitive spirit was deep-rooted. I continued to make straight A's, and I would have liked to be my class valedictorian. But I decided to finish high school in 3 rather than 4 years, and graduating from summer school ruined my chances. My first experience with envy became when I watched my friend Dorothy begin her study at Rice Institute. My family simply could not afford to send me to college, and in those days, scholarships were rare. So what could I do to compete with my friends who were able to further their formal education? I knew it had to be something great. And what seemed great to a 17-year-old girl in those days? You're right, I got married. He was a member of the musical group called Hawaiian Strummers and a very big radio star in Houston. I thought he was a tremendous catch, sort of the Elvis Presley of the time. Maybe I couldn't go to college, but there was no doubt that this was a real feather in my cap. It was also the first time my competitive spirit created a real problem, because it drove me to do something I would later regret. We began our family and started to build a life together. But by the time my husband's work took us to Dallas, our young marriage had become very unhappy. And when he left to serve in World War II, I became the sole emotional and financial support of our 3 children. The worst blow was yet to come. My husband returned from the war and announced that he wanted a divorce. It was the lowest point of my life, and I had developed a sense of worth for my abilities as a wife and mother, and yet on that day I felt like a complete and total failure. Nothing had ever struck me so hard. But I didn't have the time to sit around and feel sorry for myself. I had 3 children to raise. To do that, I had to have a good paying job with flexible hours. The flexibility was essential because I knew that I wanted to spend time with my children when they needed me. Direct sales was a natural solution, and so I became a dealer for Stanley Home Products. I enjoyed selling, but nothing excited me quite as much as the company contests. It was just that old competitive spirit of mine. I particularly remember one contest that really fired me up. The Stanley Home Products Company announced that whoever recruited the greatest number of new dealers in a single week would be crowned Miss Dallas. Well, I decided that it was the only way I would ever be Miss Dallas, so I was determined to win. Our sales were usually achieved in a group presentation called a party. As many as 25 people would be invited to the home of a hostess where the sales representative would demonstrate and sell Stanley products. It was essential that I generate enough sales to pay my bills, so I was holding at least 3 Stanley parties a day. I knew that I couldn't hold all those parties and win a recruiting contest, so I arranged for other Stanley dealers to take my place at my scheduled presentations for 1 week. That way I can concentrate on recruiting new people. I reasoned that I had one terrific source for new recruits, my date book. Because I had been conducting so many parties, it was just crammed with names of former hostesses. I sat down and started to work. I telephoned to every hostess in my date book. Someone may have told me earlier that she was not interested in becoming a dealer, but circumstances can change, so I called everyone. I would say, "Hi, Betty Ann. My company is planning to add some additional people in your area. And when I asked myself who would be great at doing what I do, I thought of you. Have you ever thought about going to work?" She might answer hesitantly, "Well, Mary Kay, I just don't know." So I would reply, "I'm going to be out your way this afternoon. I'd love to talk to you for a few minutes and bring you some literature to read. Would about 2 o'clock be convenient?" All week, I used the mornings to call former hostesses and make appointments, and then I spent the afternoons recruiting. I wanted to win that contest, and with 17 recruits in a single week, I did. I was willing to give up a lot of sales commissions to win, but as it turned out, I earned almost as much money as usual. You see, many of the women I called declined my invitation to join our company, but in closing, they said, "I'm glad you called. I need some," or "My sister-in-law was just talking to me about having a party." It doesn't look like much now, but I still have that Miss Dallas ribbon. Recognition was as vital to me as money. I was convinced that I wasn't the only competitive woman around, so when I set out to form my dream company, I remembered that important point. I believed that even if they wouldn't work hard for money, there were women who would work hard for recognition. Because I wanted a company that utilized the best elements of competition, I carefully avoided contests in which there would be only 1 or 2 or 3 winners. I am convinced that competition is most productive when you are competing with yourself. So at Mary Kay Cosmetics, everyone can be a winner. Just as my Miss Dallas ribbon was a symbol of my victory, every organization devises its own set of symbols. Once I worked for a company that awarded little loving cups for meeting a $1,000 monthly wholesale quota. Surely you know that I did my best to get as many as I could. I put them on the mantle and until I ran out of space, and soon there were so many that I ended up with a box in a closet. The only fun I ever had with them was when people asked, "What are all those loving cups for?" I'd answer, "For loving, of course." That taught me that symbols should be both pretty and useful. At Mary Kay, we gained international recognition for symbols such as automobiles, furs, dream vacations, and diamonds. But it all began with something I called the Golden Goblet Club. My intent was simple enough for each monthly wholesale transaction of $1,000. A consultant would win a beautiful gold-plated goblet. When someone had completed a set of 12, she would then win a matching tray. After 20, she would win a pitcher, and soon she would have a beautiful set for her dining room. I was so excited when I told Richard my plan. All she has to do to win a goblet is to sell $1,000 worth of wholesale merchandise in a month. Richard looked at me in disbelief. "We're dealing with reality," he said. "Our top people sell approximately 150 a week, and you're talking about selling 1,000 in a month? Do you really think they're going to do that to win a stupid cup?" You must realize that this was back in the day when we're still publishing the names of people who sold $100 or more in a single week. All 5 of them, that is. But I remembered the Miss Dallas contest. Recognition is the key, I thought. "Yes, Richard," I said firmly, "they will work for it. This is going to be a very exclusive club, and only a few people will own a golden goblet, and they'll do it because they want the recognition the goblet symbolizes." "I think you've lost your mind," he said. In his opinion, no one in the world would knock herself out to win a goblet, even if it was gold-plated. But a lot of women did. They competed against their own past records in order to win those goblets. After a year or 2, we had to stop inscribing them. We were just giving out too many. And then in a few more years, we began getting inquiries as to whether or not the company would consider buying them back, because many consultants simply had no use for scores and scores of golden goblets. From this pioneer program, we developed the Ladder of Success, and it too is based on the principle that a person competes when she competes with herself. The symbol for this competition is a gold pin on which each rung and each jewel represents a different personal plateau. Consultants and sales instructors wear their ladder of success with great pride, and everyone who knows that a person whose ladder is covered with diamonds is one of our star performers. It's like wearing a straight A report card on your lapel. At Mary Kay Cosmetics, we try to have contests in which everyone can have a chance at victory. I've seen too many competitions in which there was a first, second, and third prize while everyone else lost. Once I was employed as a national training director for a direct sales company that used such methods to motivate people. Because I was training the sales force, it was necessary for me to travel to many different cities. I used to say that what I needed most in that job was an asbestos suit, because everywhere I went I had to put out fires before I could even get down to training. You can neither teach nor motivate people who are at one another's throats. I knew that in my company I did not want to see anyone step on anyone else to win a contest. That kind of competition is only destructive. Andrew Carnegie once said, "The first man gets the oyster, the second man gets the shell." A competition in which there's only one winner may motivate some people, but I believe it usually produces adverse effects. At Mary Kay Cosmetics, everyone has an opportunity to get the oyster, the shell, and the pearl. But we go a step further. Instead of pearls, we award sapphires, rubies, and diamonds. Today, Mary Kay Cosmetics is more than a post-retirement idea or wishful thinking. It has become a reality. And for me, a dream come true. The beautiful part is that every day I see the dream come true for other women. So that is chapter 2, A Competitive Spirit. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoy that chapter.